Some parts of Europe, it's nearly 40% of second-hand and reused. So in a time of economic strain, where do people go? They go for recondition and reuse.
Carl, welcome to the IFA 2023 live podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, very good. Warm. It's lovely. I've come over from the UK, which actually is starting to heat up now. I was expecting sort of mixed weather here, but it's beautiful sunshine. So great backdrop for the show.
It's nice. And how's your time been in Berlin so far?
So, well, it's been great. I've already been doing some networking this morning, met some old contacts, made some new ones, which is good. As I say, that obviously IFA's been through a transition over the last 12 months. Stands, the rooms are full and there's lots of footfall. I understand today's exceptionally busy as well. So great for the new management.
Yeah, just bustling and full of energy and, of course, wonderful tech everywhere. So, Carl, for people who might not know you or the company, can you give a little brief introduction, your background and what it is your company does?
Yeah, so my background has been for the last, 15, 16 years, market research. My first job was in IT. I was selling computers in a Curry superstore in the UK. Moved into distribution. Went into vendor land as part of a tech startup. Then got to a point where I was kind of a choice of staying in the channel or talking about the channel. So it was a sales manager role for a software vendor, or it was market research. So I joined GfK back in 2008. Back then I was recruiting resellers and system integrators, very much orientated towards B2B. But then working with retailers as well, and then moved back into pretty much sort of my default position, which was sales. So I was client success director there, and that was about looking after a large pipeline, 200 clients, ranging in sizes from 1,500 to multiple thousands of euros. And then I just wanted to change things up a bit. So I was there about 14 years. And I moved into consumer insight. So moved to a company based in Hamburg, actually. Selling consumer insights to the likes of Unilever, Nestle, Warner, Samsung, and others. And then Fox came along, Foxintelligence, which really was the missing piece. So, if you look at market research generally, whether it be the IDCs, the Gartners, GfK, Context, any of those, obviously they all have powerful data and what they do and how the sort of some of the niches that they occupy. But you need to understand online more and more. I mean, having an online-offline split is one thing. But then there are sub-channels within online. So you've obviously got D2C, which, digital first brands was growing before COVID. You've got then marketplace, and 3P selling. So you've got all of this and social selling, which in the UK, TikTok launched in November last year. I'm doing a talk tomorrow talking a bit more about TikTok, but within beauty, they're already at 4% market share online, and they're expanding into other categories as well. I mean, that's November. And they've already gained, 4% share online. So the whole thing with Fox was understanding a bit more about the dynamics of online and marketplace, refurb and secondhand. Something I always, was always there. When you're looking at market research and looking at a country, you're often trying to create a total addressable market. So any brand that's here here at the event will look at what's the size of the market, what can they go after. Then with the likes of GfK and Context and others, you then define the features that you can go after and the price points you can go after, and you dig further down. So what you do is then you understand the niche, the area, the sort of the price bands that you can go after. Well, the thing is that's great, but obviously the share of wallet is a much bigger thing. Now, consumer insight I'm going to talk about in a minute, but share of wallet is about disposable income. So in Germany, in UK, France, Spain, Italy, so on, how much money consumers have to spend and where do they spend it? Now, it's all very well talking about tech and durables, and this is a tech and durables event, but FMCG, food, beauty, and so on, they're all growing share online. If you look at most of EU5, tech and durables was number one when you look at share of online spend. That was, without fault. In the UK, it's fashion. So already we've got seen that tech and durables has fallen to the number 2 spot. And because the online space is maturing, and marketplaces and Shopify's and big commerce and all these facilitators of online, you're now seeing that what was predominantly an early adopter tech premium type area is now becoming mass market. So more categories are selling online, which means that tech and durables actually is, whilst the online has grown. I mean, I know we've had a bit of a problem with COVID because everybody was out buying desks and laptops and so on during COVID. But if you look at 2019, we're seeing some growth online compared to the last couple of years, not so much. But the problem is the share of these individual categories, whether it be subscription services, home and lifestyle. Obviously, you've got quite a lot of consumer electronics here, kitchen appliances and so on. They're all taking away from the tech part, whilst the market's growing, where their share is actually, in some cases, diminishing. So understanding a bit more about online was the driver for me. And obviously, because we have a lot of new products selling, there is a significant market. Some parts of Europe, it's nearly 40% of secondhand and reused. So in the time of economic strain, where do people go? They go for reconditioned and reused.
So then how do you go about tracking that, refurbed market? Is it just analyzing, the Craigslist, Marktplaats, whatever the local markets are? What's the actual rationale there?
It's a good question. Now, I have been, for the last 15 odd years, I've been talking about the market data based on the fact that all retailers share with, for example, GfK or with NIQ. They share the data, and you can then work out, based on all the retailers sharing the data together, you aggregate it and you come up with a market picture. The unique thing about Foxintelligence is that the IP doesn't sit with the retailer, the IP sits with the consumer, because our panel is based around an app called CleanFox, which is available today. You download the app, over 6 million people have already, and it cleans your emails. So as a sort of target market, anybody with more than one email address or more than sort of 20 emails a week, so 20 emails a day, they would use CleanFox because it cleans, it categorizes. It's kind of like a Tinder, swipe right, swipe left. Do you want it? Anyway, some of these users then consent for us to then scan their email for filtering through their email, GDPR compliant, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Just pulling out the purchase data. So who they bought from. So, for example, it could be Amazon. What was it? It was a monitor. What brand was it? It was Dell. And what price point and some features. So we collect all that information in each of the countries we operate. We're just doing the languages now for Japan. But we have 370,000 consumers running this app in the UK who are consenting to sharing their e-receipts with us. So that means now we're collecting data. And what that added bonus is that we don't have to protect about, retailers' performances and so on, because the IP sits with the consumer. So in my keynote tomorrow at 11, I'm going to be talking about the top performing retailers, the top performing bricks and mortar, D2C, and then obviously pure players like the likes of Amazon. But then I can also mark out secondhand as well, because obviously in those e-receipts, it says new.
So in terms of kind of broad e-commerce trends that you're seeing at the minute, you mentioned some of them a little bit in the introduction, where the tech and durables have dropped down in certain markets, fashion has taken over a little bit in the UK, but what are some of the broad, whether it's global or pan-European trends that you're seeing when it comes to e-commerce behavior? Has there been a shift? Obviously, COVID was very online focused. Have there been any other interesting shifts or modulations?
So I guess the first one that I wouldn't say warn, but a bit of insight for the rest of Europe. So as I say, TikTok launched in November. Okay, they're already moving into more than just beauty. They're doing fashion, they're doing tech and durables, they're doing kitchen and appliances, etc. Social selling is something that everybody knows they've got to do. But it's, as the research shows, is that people don't tend to take their advice from the brand. They take it from influencers. So as TikTok has now, they were using Shopify, for example, to do all the back-end commerce. They've now dropped them and gone, taken it in-house. So that will mean that they will move into other countries and other regions, which means that, you're going to see that share. We've known for a long time that independent validation is very, very important. That's why review sites, they feed a lot, especially if it's our friends and family, that referral process. So imagine within social selling, you've got that element of it. And this is outside of traditional channels. So if you're not using BigCommerce or Shopify or somebody like that, if you don't have influencers within your remit, then you're going to be missing out on a sizable part of the market. That's one element of it. The other thing is obviously across Europe, online is maturing. So we're seeing digitally native brands appearing, popping up that you've never heard of and never seen, but they're taking share. It might be 0.1, 0.3%, whatever it may be, but they're taking share. They operate on different cost models. You can build a website, you can build a brand within social, have a back-end engine through some of the aggregators that are out there, and you can pop up with very little cost, a true SaaS model. And effectively, all you've got to do, they don't even have to ship the products. It's being fulfilled, drop shipped by another company. Now, I'm not saying that's going to have an impact on the big brands. Okay, I'm not, because ultimately there is still a demand and a market for that area. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the center of the market where the premium and the value is, okay, the cash cow, as it were, around the fringes, you're now starting to see these entrants coming in and taking their lunch. It's small, take into account secondhand and refurb as well, which has always been there. But, as a brand, you want to show you're growing year on year. And while you're doing that, all very well. And if the market's growing, all very well. But obviously, as we've seen within IT recently, post-COVID, that's not been the case. Of course, obviously, then it puts price pressure on and we see discounting. The interesting thing about online, this is something I've known for some time and most of the pundits have been talking about, average selling price online is typically higher than it is in store.
Why is that?
Well, if you look at D2C, okay, if you have a D2C brand, okay, and you are supporting retail, you are not going to undercut your retail partners. You're just not going to do it. So you will sell at RRP, but consumers will come to you because one, you've got brand compliance, you've got information, there's a follow-up, etc. So they sell at full price. The other thing is that most retailers in store do a good, better, best. There's a limited range and then they populate through Omni, they go and send you online. But again, once you're online, you have then that ladder effect, which is, like when you buy a new iPhone or a Galaxy phone, a bit more storage, a bit better features.
Yeah, just being constantly kind of upsold with
because
user
the range,
design.
Absolutely. And obviously you can be more respondent. So one of the things that we have, not only our consumer insight part, but our data is literally updated hourly. So as soon as we saw the Amazon promotion come in, we could see straight away what was selling and what wasn't. Campaigns. So for example, if somebody's sponsoring the Grand Prix, we'd be able to see the impact of the Grand Prix because we have what's called cohorts, because the consumers share with us their e-receipts. They also share with us their hobbies, their newsletters. Okay. So, one of the things, I was doing some bits on the data on our platform last week about people who follow Greenpeace. Was it having a material impact on their buying patterns?
And what did you find?
Not a great deal. There is. It's the whole thing about instinct, and people buy emotionally and make decisions intellectually. You sit there and you have you say that you're going to do something, you do it, and then you see it, and then the price you have in your head and the price you see. There are many factors, psychological factors, but the fact of the matter is, when you're looking across Europe, UK and Germany are pretty well developed, although Germany's still developing more, and so is the UK. And I was talking about the different categories that are starting to grow. We're now seeing that in Italy. We're now seeing that in France. We're now seeing that in Spain. So whilst the market continues to grow, that's great. Obviously, putting aside for a moment IT over the last year compared to COVID.
Yeah.
But you're seeing now the share being more equally spread. Whereas tech and durables was the number one on online share, it's now, like I said, UK fashion.
Stuff starting to shift.
People are buying more online in their FMCG, their food, fashion, beauty, and so on, because we're becoming digitally native. We just, it becomes potentially the first place we go. There's the whole concept of web rooming and showrooming. So, older generations would, go into a store and they would go and buy it, for example, and then you would then think that the younger generation would go online. The fact of the matter is, it's more nuanced than that. So there are people that go in store, see the product, and then go home and buy it or order it on their phone. Or there's other ones that will, look at the product online and then go and buy it in store. Now, whichever you serve, you have to serve both. That's what Omni is. There should be no discrepancy of where they come in. The journey is the really crucial part. And obviously, I touched on social selling. The journey of how a consumer goes from that moment of idea, the light bulb moment, to when they actually make that transaction.
Just trying to understand how that transaction happens and how that decision occurs.
Yeah. So, myself and other research organizations very much talk about the purchase journey a great deal more. But I guess the single most thing is that, these brands are becoming more aware. The online market is becoming more mature. The barriers to entry are becoming less and less. So, in Germany, if you were taking on Otto or MediaMarkt and so on a few years ago, there'll be a huge amount of barriers for you to try and take on that market. But now with the aggregators, the e-commerce aggregators at the back, and obviously the supply of products, globalization has enabled these organizations to set up shop born on the internet.
And is that something that you expect to see kind of in the future? If you're having to predict 5 to 10 years, do you think these trends are going to continue, like more smaller players growing, the importance of social expanding, influencers, and then I guess do you think there'll be a wider mix as well of shopping? Like how do you expect that pan up to like 2030, 2050?
If you look at that and the way people are buying, based on what I'm seeing today in our data and what I've seen over the last few years with GfK, you're going to see more and more diversity. I mean, this whole idea of basically penning down individual types of retailers, e-tailers. I mean, click and mortar was, very in the very early days was pretty non-existent. Now retailers have got very, very savvy about omni-channel, and they're growing. They're coming back to fight on, the pure players. But this digitally native brand, these people who are born on the internet, they are going to start taking a share. And the other thing, of course, is that direct to consumer. Brands for a long time were all about selling in store. That was their predominant focus. But before COVID, we were seeing that, brands were starting to sell directly. I remember, when just before I left GfK, the likes of Samsung were selling, direct. That's something that's grown more and more and more. So that means now you've got the brand representing themselves online. You've got the retailer who's obviously representing them online. But the interesting thing is, and this is where the money is for the retailer, which is called retail media. Because these retailers have a heck of a lot of traffic. These traditional big brand, you go into any high street or out-of-town shopping center, you see that banner that has a lot of goodwill behind it. Mm-hmm. These websites, including some of the pure players, are now selling the real estate on their websites, and they are now charging for that. That's been always the case about sponsor. Sponsor this page. You're looking for a computer, Azus sponsors that computer's page. But they're realizing actually that traffic is worth something.
So to think more like media and online publications as opposed to straight up retailers.
It's another revenue stream. And the thing is that, one thing that these digitally native brands don't have at the moment is traffic and footfall and all those types of things. So they obviously are very much looking for a specific type of audience. They're going through typically social. They're bringing influencers in to gather that, to gain that goodwill. But the retail now have through and online pure players, they have another revenue stream as well, which is fantastic. I mean, it's a vibrant additional revenue stream to these retailers on top of what they're selling from the products. Because price pressure is, even now with COVID, especially within, for example, IT, price pressure is really high because ownership is so high. 2 years of everybody working at home, buying all the stuff they needed.
Having more disposable income.
They weren't going out traveling. They weren't going out lunches. They were buying all those bits and so on. Interestingly, and you'll see this from NIQ and also from GfK, is that, it's about experiences now. Consumers have gone from this needing to own something, which they've had to do, and that's still there. We're still a very materialistic race, as it were. But experiences is growing as well. So that experience of the brand. I was at a festival not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and it was a car festival. And, if you're not at this festival and you're a D2C brand, but there's all about the experience. It was every stand was all about bringing you in, sitting and educating you and inspiring you and so on. And that's what's being done online as well. So I think experience is something that has to be brought across, and it's not random that some of the bigger brands now, with their campaigns, it's very focused around what you can achieve, your life can be better, all of those things. Don't just take our product, go and take that product, go and do something with it.
Yeah, it helps you define you as a person, to expand. And is that something you expect then to continue in the future, just this shift towards brands not being a product, but it's an enabler of your life?
I mean, it has been the case for some years, and every PR company out there is going, look, you're trying to sell a product. Every PR company and research marketing department will do a segmentation, basically segmenting different types of consumers. People who spend a lot of money in my area, people who don't spend a lot of money in my area, people I want to go after who have a high disposable income. They do that segmentation. First of all, they size it, and then they work out the types of consumers that they're going after. That experience piece is going to grow. And actually, as technology has developed so much now with online, with Web 3.0, the experience of visiting a site is becoming more and more. I mean, Apple have done it, Samsung have done it. You go to the site and it becomes, it's not just a static image anymore. It becomes a bit of entertainment. It's a living, breathing advert. And of course, obviously, with the analytics behind it and tracking and seeing where people stay and how long they are and so on, it's getting cleverer and cleverer. So, tech is great at that. It evolves and evolves, and every once in a while you see some innovation. But it's always very good at reinventing itself and getting better.
Carl, thank you very much for your time. That was a fascinating insight into how we're shopping and where we're going to end up in the future. So thank you for coming here and sharing your wide breadth of knowledge with us.
Thank you very much.